Graves, and I started getting interested in lactation when I worked as a nutrition technician in the Women and Children's, Women, Infant, and Children's, known as WIC, and Spokane, Washington, because women would come and talk to me postpartum, prenatally and postpartum. And prenatally, they would say, oh, yes, I am breastfeeding for sure. And then we would see them like 1 or 2 months postpartum, and they would have started breastfeeding, and then were not longer breastfeeding or partially breastfeeding. And so we just couldn't figure out what was happening in that time. So I became interested in that. And I went to a week-long training to learn more about breastfeeding. And I got a certificate that said that I was a lactation educator. So I came back to my office, and this was an office that served rural areas. So we would travel like an hour or so outside of like the city to go to like Airway Heights or in farther, and just see these participants of WIC. Some of them were English speakers and some of them were Spanish speakers. So for the English speakers, I designed a small short class to just discuss just general information about breastfeeding and give them some resources that we had available in the area. And then for Spanish speakers, I would just kind of meet with them one-on-one. So the more I started doing that work, the more I realized I needed more skills to be able to help these people. So when I moved to Oregon in 2011, I looked for jobs in WIC because that's what I knew. And at that time, they had a position as a peer counselor or working in the peer counseling program. So it was a small part-time. So I started working with 2 other people in the program. One was a lactation consultant, another one was a lactation educator like me. And so we would put together classes and meet with participants one-on-one, and we would even send them information through their phones. But I got to also spend more time developing some clinical skills when the lactation consultant would see the patient. At that time, I was also working as a support group facilitator at a local hospital. And we just had a support group in English, and it was for new parent support group. So all that was going well, but the hospital support group, these moms were coming to me with more complex questions. And I just kept reaching out to the IBCLCs that I knew. And then they would ask me questions. I'm like, oh, why didn't I ask that question? So more and more every time. And, just like they say, the more you learn, the more you know that you don't know much, and the more you have to learn, right? So I started to look into what it would take for me to become a lactation consultant. And I had just a couple of classes, college classes, that were more like English composition and things like that. So I think it was 2012 that I finally decided to go back to school and start taking some of those prerequisites to be qualified to sit for the exam. And since one of the requirements was to have had experience, with patients or one-on-one, like some clinical experience. But providing support to people, I thought, well, maybe while I'm doing this thing, acquiring those that experience, I can be doing some of the classes. So it took a long time. I only took like 1 or 2 classes per term because I was also a full-time mom. And so I was getting pretty close to being done with my classes when I met Dr. Nan Dahlquist through the hospital that I was working for. And I don't know, I fell in love with her. And I asked her if she would be willing to just kind of let me come and just follow her around and work with her at her pediatric clinic. And she said, oh, of course, yes, we need more people, to be doing this work. And so I worked with her probably from 2015 to 2016, right before I sat for my exam. And I learned so much. And I wasn't required to have those hours because I had already accumulated the hours that I needed for the to qualify for the exam, but it was definitely super helpful and enriching. So, and having her support was just incredible, and hers and the other 2 lactation consultants that work with her. So I sat for the exam, and I thought it was, I was super nervous, but I honestly was like, okay, well, we'll give it a try, and then couldn't believe that I would pass. But so I just told myself, it's okay, nobody gets perfect the first time they try something. So I was sure that I didn't pass, but another nurse at the hospital and one of the midwives, we took the exam at the same time, and all 3 of us passed, and I was just so thrilled. Yeah. So so then I stayed with so then Dr. Dahlquist hired me to work 1 day a week at her clinic, and I've been working with her and working at the hospital. Then I realized that just the one time moment that I would see these parents, especially in the hospital setting, in the inpatient setting, was not enough. And so I kept on doing classes, education classes, both in English and Spanish. So I collaborated with the midwives and Virginia Garcia. They were doing a centering program there. So I would come in one of their sessions for centering, and just talk about breastfeeding and just answer moms' questions. Anything that they want to talk about, all the myths, cultural and myths, and just everything. I thought it was super helpful for the participants of the class, as well as the midwives, because then they would hear things that they hadn't heard before, and for myself, because it allowed me to get to know these patients that they were going to deliver at the hospital. And so I would see them prenatally, and then through their stay at the hospital, and then postpartum, either because they were coming to Hillsborough Pediatrics, or because I would see them at Virginia Garcia, or because they would come to the support group. So there was a connection there, and it was great. But I still wanted to do some more. So since I had almost all my prerequisites for nursing, when I finished my prerequisites for IBCLC, I decided to go back to nursing school, and now I passed, and that's what I did. So now that I work as a nurse in Hillsborough Medical Center, I am able to not only see one feeding, but see all the feedings of that night for 3 couplets, right? That's my workload. And I am so happy that I have the opportunity to work with a variety of a diverse group of people, and those lactation skills are so so important in my work as a labor delivery postpartum nurse.